I started my career in real estate by flipping houses with two different business partners. And one of those business partners was a real estate agent. Because of that, I assumed that he was going to be qualified and professional. But after getting sent a contract that was absolutely full of mistakes, including missing a zero from the purchase price, or finding out the day of closing on one of the houses that we were selling that the buyer never got the appraisal done, which delayed closing 2 weeks, I realized he was just a sloppy salesman with a license. And I want to help you avoid a similar situation by giving you the 5 questions and the reasoning behind those 5 questions to help you identify an awesome listing agent. And just so you know, I'm speaking from experience. Since 2018, my wife and I have sold over 550 houses, and we flipped over 20 houses ourselves. Not saying that to brag, just so you know what I'm talking about. Question number 0, and this is not a question, but rather a precaution to take, because every single time that I have been sold something, I've always left feeling extremely disappointed. And after reflecting on it for a while, I've boiled it down to 2 different red flags. First, the person you're interviewing is great, extremely likable. You guys are getting along. Every time you give them the opportunity to talk about the process and how much they know about the process, they just turn the direction the other way and kind of serve you a nothing burger where you're trying to get into the meat and potatoes of, hey, what's actually going to happen behind the scenes once we start this? And instead of telling you, they just probably don't even know. The second red flag is not taking notes. If you're watching this video, chances are you like to do your research. You already know what you want. You're going to know what questions to ask a real estate agent. You've got very specific things that you need to tell them. And if they're not taking notes, there's a good chance that information is going in through one ear and right out the other. And one last thing before we actually dive into the questions, all of them are open-ended. So don't ever give somebody that you're interviewing a yes or no question. It should always be like a how, a why, maybe not why. Why can be combative, but open-ended, not yes or no. Your goal should be to get them to show their knowledge, make you comfortable working with them, or get them to kind of, squirm. So question number 1, how would you advertise my property? Then just be quiet and listen. The goal here is to find out whether they actually advertise or they're just gonna list the house on the market like every other real estate agent does. And if they start using some weird jargon that you don't really understand, one of my favorite things to say to people is, hey, can you explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old? If they can't explain it simply, they don't know it well enough. If they say anything about SEO, that is likely a red flag because chances are they're just talking about listing it on Realtor.com, Redfin, Zillow, all of these really big nationwide websites that every real estate agent, when they list them on the MLS, it goes to those websites anyways. If listing your house on the market is all you want from a realtor, you should just go to a website like Houseo that's a flat fee listing service and you can get it on the market for a fraction of the cost. Here are some common ways agents advertise properties. First, social media. So think Facebook, Instagram. Now, just posting it on those platforms isn't going to be enough because there's a statistic out there that only 12% of someone's followers actually see their posts. What you need to do is find somebody that actually knows how to run ads, and that is paying money to put it in front of people. A good example is this duplex that we recently sold. We made a little photo. Normally we would like to do videos, but in this case we made a photo, paid, and put it in front of 69,000 people, whereas I think my wife has over 9,000 followers on Instagram, and generally only like 2,500 people actually see her posts. So they need to know how to run ads. Second, mailers. And if the agent says that they're going to send mail, make sure that you ask for a copy of piece of mail that they've previously sent out for their listings, because sometimes, might sound silly, sometimes agents will say they're advertising your property and sending mail for your property, but in reality, they're sending mail to all your neighbors and asking them if they want to sell their house as well, which it's all about the call to action. You can either get a piece of mail that says, hey, do you want to sell your house? Or, hey, your neighbor's house is for sale. Do you want to choose your neighbor? So that might sound a little redundant, but just ask to see the marketing materials. Third, open houses. Now, putting signs out on the road is one thing, but doing a mega open house is something else. We haven't actually done this before, but one of our friends in the DC area will actually pay for a food truck to come out to the open house, and he'll either give them like $500 or $1,000 to come out. And then what he'll do is he'll send mailers or go door knock the neighborhood to all the neighbors and be like, hey, you want to come to our open house? Invite a friend that you want to move to the neighborhood, and I will give you guys each a $10 food ticket, which they get a huge turnout from. So to sum up advertising, just make sure there's some kind of marketing plan other than putting it on the MLS. You want the listing agent to be invested and financially invested. If interviewing real estate agents just sounds too daunting to you, you can skip the entire process by using today's show's sponsor, 5 Pillars Team. My wife Shelby and I are happy to connect you with a real estate agent in your area that we personally trust. Just go down in the description and hit connect with me. Question 2, what experience do you have in real estate? Now, 9 times out of 10, I'd rather see you go with someone who is slightly less experienced that is still eager to earn your business and do a really good job from start to finish versus the agent who just has tons of people coming to them. They've been an agent for 20 years and they just get to pick whoever they want to work with. Those agents tend to get lazy and they're just really well known. I'd rather go with someone who's sold at least 10 houses and that is still like on the hustle grind, like they're gonna do a good job for you. So you can ask them how many listings that they've sold and how long have you been in the business, because you don't want someone that's sold, I've sold 100 houses, but they've been in the business for 50 years. It's like, 2 houses a year for the past 50 years. That's a little experience, but they are super part-time. And then you could follow that up by asking them about their last 2 listings. How many days were those listings on the market? What was their marketing plan? How many offers did they get? What difficulties did they run into? Because that's really important. They're going to tell you that they're perfect all the time. I promise you, when a buyer is using a real estate agent and that real estate agent is working with the seller's agent and then you have the seller agent on the other side, there's almost always some kind of issue, whether that's the buyer's lender or the buyer's agent, or maybe even the listing agent dropped the ball. Now, they're probably not going to admit to that, but it's really important that they tell you like, hey, I am competent and I can work through struggles. I'm not just going to give up on you and leave you stranded on an island if we run into a hiccup. And then the last thing that I would ask them is if you can actually speak to one of those people whose houses that they recently sold. That way you can talk to their client and find out whether or not the agent was telling you the full story about the client. Hear it from both sides. Question number 3, how much do you know about construction? Now again, just be quiet and listen. This might sound like a weird question to some of you, but here's a perfect example of why it's really important. It was the end of 2021 and Shelby and I were selling one of our flips in Charlotte. At the end of 2021, Christmas was rolling around. We were getting kind of nervous. The market was still hot, but it was still like, things gonna change at Christmas time? Anyways, we had a buyer come along that made us a great offer. It was a $5,000 non-refundable deposit. They were $5,000 over asking price. They gave us an appraisal gap addendum saying that they were willing to pay more than the appraisal. It was awesome. It seemed like a solid offer. So we went under contract and we were ecstatic. But the buyer or the buyer's agent ended up getting an inspection done on the HVAC and plumbing by the most expensive HVAC and plumbing contractor in all of Charlotte, I think. Now, of course, from that inspection, super strange, they get a full quote to replace all of the plumbing in the house and the HVAC. And I looked at the quote and it didn't say that there were any defects with the plumbing. It was literally just a quote. So then the buyer's agent came back to us saying that the plumbing and the HVAC needed to be completely replaced, but hey, don't worry, we'll handle it. We're just asking for a $40,000 price drop. And of course, I know a decent bit about construction. The house was only 30 years old. It's not like it was falling apart. Now, the contractor did do kind of a sloppy job, but all the mechanicals of the house were fine. It's only 30 years old. It got to the point with the buyer's agent where she said, hey, if you don't accept this price reduction, you're going to have to market this property later on as, it needs all of these defects. And after I went through the actual inspection, it wasn't an actual inspection. It was literally just a quote saying the HVAC was at the end of its life. Yeah, it's an 8-year-old HVAC unit. Of course it is. There was no defects with the plumbing. It was a quote to get all of the plumbing replaced. Because of that, I was able to tell that buyer's agent, hey, I don't really care about your threats. You can do whatever you want, but we're not taking your offer. So we kept the buyer's $5,000 in due diligence money and moved on. And guess what? Nothing happened to us. Question number 4, what is your commission? Now, if you've seen in the news this year, you've probably seen the lawsuit with NAR against, I think it's the Department of Justice. And in the headlines, it says, no more 6% commissions, or you don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore, which isn't entirely true. So I'm going to do a quick explanation of this, and really quick explanation. Prior to the lawsuit, the listing agent would talk to the sellers, and in the listing agreement, they would agree on how much they were actually going to pay the buyer's agent for bringing them a buyer. But the truth is, that wasn't actually really a requirement. But some realtors told sellers that they had to pay a buyer's agent, which was technically true because in the MLS that the listing agents were in order for them to actually list the house on the market, put it into the system that spreads it out to, Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, all of those sites, they had a little field in there where it said buyer's agent commission, and you could not enter zero. You had to at least enter $1. But $1, is that really like a requirement to pay? Come on. Anyway, we live in America and it is a free market, so the sellers should not have to pay for the services that the buyers are getting. Right? So now the sellers aren't required to pay for a buyer's agent at all. But don't get your hopes up, because buyers 88% of the time will go through a buying agent. And if you're going to turn down 7 out of 10 offers just because they're asking for you to pay for the buyer's agent commission, you might be waiting a while. And let's be honest, all that matters is what goes into your pocket, and you are free to do whatever you want because we live in America. So back to pricing, how much is your commission? How much do you cost? If you talk to anyone in the industry, including me, will say 9 out of 10 real estate agents are not worth what they charge. They either lack skills, knowledge, or experience. And to be honest, just because someone sells a lot of houses, that doesn't make them a good agent. As far as commissions go, this is something that I have to tiptoe around because when you get your real estate license, I think that half of the course is about hey, don't set the standard rate for any sort of industry. It's called price fixing or something or another. So I can't say anything on industry averages. But what I've seen in my personal experience is just to put your house on the market, which I think I spoke about earlier, it's like $750. That's a flat fee. You don't get any assistance as far as negotiating or help with the contract, signing, blah, blah, blah. But I've also seen $750 at a minimum, and sometimes below that it will be even less. So if an agent's selling a $30,000 lot and they're only getting a 3% commission, I guess technically that doesn't work out because that's $900. But you see what I mean, a $10,000 lot, they're only going to get $300. So it just gives you an idea of that's the bottom. Now, as far as height, there's some people who get 5% commissions on multi-million-dollar deals, sometimes deca, or maybe even $100 million deals. I've never heard of that, but it's a possibility. And that 5% is just to the listing agent, not to the buyer's agent as well. That's just what I've seen for the minimum and maximum price. Now, as far as what we charge, 2.5% on our low end and 4% on the high end, depending on whatever package our sellers want to choose. So if you're not sure, how much you should be paying in commission, feel free to go to the Connect with Me link in the description below and just reach out. Happy to talk. So the last question, number 5, do you have a process? Do you remember at the beginning of the video when I talked about one of my first business partners? Well, before I beat him up any further, I would like you to know that I believe he is a great person, but he lacks attention to detail, and that makes it even more important to have a process. Now, a process is just a series of individual tasks that lead you to a desired end state. I like to think of a process as stepping stones across a river, and each individual step or stone is a step in the process, and you can't skip those steps to get to the other side. But when it comes to selling your house, some of those stones are just turtles coming up for air, or certain stones only appear after stones 3, 6, 9, and before this one. So you have to make sure that you go through all of the steps so you can get to closing on time. A good example of this is in the intro when I said the appraisal never got done. We were sitting at closing, and not only did the appraisal not get ordered, but they had to order the appraisal. Appraisers were backed up. So just to get the appraisal was another 2 weeks. And then it took, probably another week after we got the appraisal to get all of the documents ready, because buyers need an extra, 3 days after the appraisal is ready to see the actual loan docs. All situations are different, but in general, to get a house to closing, it's all the same steps. It's very, very similar, and they may not happen all at the same time. But when a mistake happens, you can go back and update that process. When you update the process to make sure the mistake doesn't happen again, it improves. And over time, less and less slip through the cracks, or, get wet, fall in the water, whatever you want to call it. And if you want to see the process that we used to get 24 offers on a property that we sold at the end of November, click on this video. If it's not there, make sure you hit subscribe so that way you get notified when the video comes out.